Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and do you want to see something really spooky? Ooh, spooky, very spooky. Well, you know what's coming to Richmond, Virginia? Nightmare Weekend. And you know what else is coming to Richmond, Virginia? It's me and Ashley Edward Miller. Yes, the legendary Ashley Edward Miller that you know and love from Inglorious Treksperts in the 430 movie, along with me, as we descend with a bunch of happy haunts on Nightmare Weekend, October 13th through the 15th, October 13th through the 15th in Richmond, Virginia. And we're not coming alone, because there's also going to be such great horror icons as Danny Trejo, Tony Todd, and if you don't think we're going to ask him about The Visitor, you're crazy. Richard Dreyfuss, Jeffrey Combs. You know, he did these horror movies, too. It wasn't just Star Trek. We're going to have a very animated or reanimated conversation with him. The stars of American Werewolf in London, David Naughton and Griffin Dunn. Boy, and if Jenny Agutter were there, I think we would probably pay to go ourselves. Cheeto Brothers, Ken Foray. The stars of Fright Night, William Ragsdale and Chris Sarandon. Andrew Divoff. Now, I got to tell you, I've been rewatching Lost. He's really good in that. There's going to be an E.T. reunion with Henry Thomas, Dee Wallace, Robert McNaughton, C. Thomas Howell, and more. And so many other guests, including Laura Birch, Vanessa Shaw, who will probably not be talking about working with Kubrick, although I'd like to talk to her about that. Tim Reed from WKRP in Cincinnati. No Les Nessman, though. Samantha Mathis, and many, many more. So, come join Ashley Edward Miller, myself, and a bunch of great horror stars in Richmond, Virginia at Nightmare Weekend. We hope to see you there. Find out more at GalaxyCon.com. That's GalaxyCon.com, and we'll see you at Nightmare Weekend, October 13th through the 15th. And if you say it, you have to say it like this: Nightmare Weekend. Anyway, happy Halloween. Okay, bye. Hey, this is Mark Altman of Inglorious Treksperts in the 430 movie. And if you're a fan of our podcast, you don't want to miss Deck 78, available now by subscribing at TrekspertsPlus.com. This is a bonus podcast full of great discussions about popular culture, film, and television. By your command, here's a sneak peek. He's great. You know, I actually like him better than Oscar Isaac. And I think the Villeneuve version is great. It surprised me how similar it is to the David Lynch version, and how people genuflect to it.
It is a remake of the Lynch movie.
Interesting.
Because it leaves out the same scenes that the Lynch movie does.
I think that's a strong statement, because I think, look, the problem with Dune is that I think it's very, very difficult to adapt because of the way that it was written and because a lot of the concepts that drive the storytelling and the adaptation choices that you have to make, I think by nature of what they are, push you towards the choices that are made in the Lynch film and in the Denis Villeneuve film, that you kind of need to, because otherwise it's very difficult, I think, to get your arms around what that story is going to be. Like, to Herbert's credit, but also if you kind of sit and just think about those books, any one of the books, as a writer, and you imagine somebody saying, "Please adapt this." It's just like, where do you even start? Where do you start? Even like Lynch couldn't crack, the how do you, do the telepathic communication? It plays, as much as I love that movie, like, it plays a little goofy in the Lynch movie. And it's because it's such a difficult thing to adapt.
Well, maybe if George Lucas had done it, there would be more of the political machinations.
Yes.
In the script.
Maybe Jimmy Smits as
Well, I think that what's cool about the Lynch version is that I know that this is mocked a lot, but that those, sort of voiceover narrations where people were getting what they think are really close to the roving narration in the novel.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where you're like, it's corny, I guess it would be one way to describe it, or goofy or off-putting. But it's funny because, I know, Mark, that you're a big Bond fan.
So subscribe today at TrexpertsPlus.com and don't miss a single episode of Deck 78. Fire the rockets.
Mark A. Altman, Darren Doctorman, Ashley Edward Miller. 3 fans who became professionals and then became Trexperts. Inglorious Trexperts. Listen wherever you find podcasts or go to TrexpertsPlus.com.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and this is It Was 40 Years Ago Today, 1983 week, and we're back. And we got Mr. Monday.
Not for long, but
well, don't. Why do you have to depress them?
Because
Let them be excited. Let them be excited.
Tuesday ruins things.
You're like a dark cloud. You're like that, like a cloud following you around. Let me introduce everyone. Mr. Monday, Stephen Melching.
Oh my God, gag me with a spoon. I'm so sure.
On Tuesday, it's the cloud, Darren Doctorman.
I'm not a cloud. I'm a human being.
A human man.
I think there's something at the heart of that cloud.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And on Wednesday, I'm going to call it now. Superman 3. It's Mr.
Kids.
Wednesday, Ashley Edward Miller.
You darn kids with your Pac-Man and your Dan Fogelberg.
Dan Fogelberg. Oh, I hated that Dan Fogelberg.
No,
Hey.
I hated that Dan Fogelberg.
You didn't hate. No,
I did. I hated that
Don't
easy
hate the
listening.
player, hate the game. And in this case, Pac-Man.
Look,
For which
I didn't
you
even
have
like
the fever.
in '83. I didn't even like bands I liked. I didn't like them. Like the Police, who I generally really liked. If I heard that Every Breath You Take one more time, oh my God, I was going to stop taking breaths. I was so annoyed with that stupid song.
So that's the secret.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it's funny. I feel kind of the same way. A lot of the music that was popular at the time, I did not like at the time, but I love it and listen to it all the time now. It's weird.
That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
I just think 82 had
Everything
such
is
great
crap.
music. 83 was the hangover.
It's a hangover for a lot of things, as
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get to shortly.
Yeah. What were you listening to when you invaded Grenada, Steve?
I was probably listening to the soundtrack to Return of the Jedi, the single LP version, which is the only one they came out with, which sucked.
Which was so shitty.
Yeah.
Not only did it have that awful key art of the hand holding the lightsaber, it was as bad as the Search for Spock one sheet. And it was missing all the good music other than Into the Trap.
and Lopty Neck, of course.
Thank God. Lefty neck. But it does have Celebrate the Love before it was replaced.
And we're going to celebrate the love of 1983 soon.
We are, but before we
Nice
do that,
segue.
Steve, before we do that, so I understand you just got back from a trip to Colorado.
Yeah, I was celebrating the love of cinema at the 50th annual Telluride Film Festival.
Holy cow.
I think I've been to about, I lost track of how many I've been to now. I think about, 13 or 14 of them.
You're
since
catching up with
1999.
me.
I know. And, it was, Telluride is just the most spectacularly beautiful mountain town you could ever want to visit. And it was a great festival, albeit somewhat subdued due to the ongoing writers and actors strike. So there were not very many actors participating this year because
we're meeting here in Mountain Town. And no actors can be found.
I actually think Telluride with less actors is probably a good thing. They could focus on the directors and all the other artists that make film.
Yeah. So, but honestly, all the times I've been there, it's kind of cool to see, Peter O'Toole riding a bicycle down Main Street, or Meryl Streep walking down the street or George Clooney in the bar. I mean, that's neat.
You mean Burbank?
But there really have never been the draw for me. And, as far as the screenings go, sometimes they'll do a brief Q&A or maybe they'll be up there, being celebrated. I did see Peter Sellers dining outdoors and resisted the urge to say, Peter, you are fashion.
Not that Peter Sellers, ladies and gentlemen. Not being there in Dr. Strangelove.
Not the dead Peter Sellers.
Steve would have to be out in the woods holding a seance to see that Peter Sellers. No, this is the opera director, the great director Peter Sellers.
Right.
But that's so funny that you say that because, of course, that was a very famous for us when I used to go to Telluride.
He was hosting the tribute to Catherine Deneuve.
Yeah. That was hysterical. Oh my God.
Otherwise known as Fridays at Rob Burnett's house.
Well, 1983 had a great Catherine Deneuve movie. We'll get to that. But Steve, so tell us, obviously you saw, we're kidding around, but you saw a lot of great movies. Telluride has really become the launching pad for so much Oscar winning films and so many just great classic movies. What did you see that you really enjoyed? Maybe what didn't make the cut?
Yeah, well, this year it felt more like the earlier days of Telluride, meaning when I started going in the late 90s and early 2000s, which was, I guess, really the midpoint of the festival. There weren't many of the obvious Oscar contenders that the festival has become famous for in recent years. But there were still a lot of great movies. I ended up being able to see 16 this time. They added a day because it was the 50th anniversary.
Like they did for the 25th.
Yeah, I think the 25th and the 30th and the 40th. And then 2 years ago for the first, the one right after the pandemic lockdown, they added a day so they could kind of spread out the screenings and have fewer people in the theaters.
It's one longer.
Yeah. So of the movies I saw, my two favorite narrative films was one called Perfect Days, which was directed by the legendary Wim Wenders, the German director who did Alice in the Cities in Paris, Texas, and one of my favorites, Wings of Desire. And this is a difficult movie to describe. It's about a middle-aged Japanese man in Tokyo whose job is to clean the public toilets of the city. And these aren't what you think of as a public toilet. These were built by the Japanese, I believe, for the Olympics, and they were each designed by master architects. So they're these really weird and beautifully designed public toilets that are immaculately clean because the Japanese are just such a clean culture. And the movie followed this guy as he went through his routine and then complications ensue. But it was a surprisingly, subtly beautiful, and ultimately emotional movie. It was really good. I wouldn't be surprised to see that as the best foreign language film contender. And my other favorite narrative film was one.
I'd like to see Blofeld invent those toilets. I see like a "You Only Live Twice" kind of thing. I think that would be really cool. Corner of the market, and we'll really, Spectre. We're gonna have.
Who does number
toilets.
2 work for?
If you don't flush, a trapdoor opens up and you go down into the.
That's right. I want to introduce you to my piranha.
Freaking sharks at the bottom. Freaking lasers on their heads.
You only go twice, 007.
My other
favorite aren't the only thing that are forever.
Oh God. My other favorite narrative film was one called The Zone of Interest, which was directed by Jonathan Glazer, who did Sexy Beast and Under the Skin. And this is a movie that was about the commandant of the Auschwitz concentration camp and his family, but it's all told from the sort of the domestic side of the wall.
Yeah,
so
it's the camp, Brady Bunch meets Schindler's List.
Oh God, yeah. So it's literally the wall of the concentration camp is the wall of their garden, and it's this looming presence through the whole movie. So you'll hear, in the background soundtrack sounds of dogs barking or distant gunshots, but it's this very sort of chilly examination of how this guy's family sort of ignores what's happening
going on, but they don't really
the horror
deal with it.
But it's a really powerful,
the
really powerful movie.
Is unbelievable of the everyday German at that time.
Yeah, and just beautifully filmed. It's just gorgeous. I also like
Glazer is such an such an interesting filmmaker. Every 10 years he did a Sexy Beast, which is just terrific, and then he disappears, and then he comes back with that crazy sci-fi Scarlett Johansson movie, Under the Skin, which is crazy. I mean, I don't know if I think I liked it. I mean, it's really an amazing movie. And this, which I'm so interested in seeing. I hear such good things. I'm glad that you gave it the proverbial melching thumbs up, because I really want to see it. It's such a fascinating subject.
It has the benefit of not having public toilets in it.
Yes, that's very much true. And then you were saying, Steve, something
and a quick rundown of the other narrative films. I saw Saltburn, which is from Emerald Fennell, who did Promising Young Woman.
It's not the sequel to Salt.
But it's kind of a slow burn thriller in the style of Talented Mr. Ripley, starring Barry Keoghan, who was so great in the Banshees of Inisherin.
And the Joker in the deleted footage from the Batman.
Yes, of course. And also had Rosamund Pike, from the Bond
Die Another Day.
Die Another Day.
Die Another Day.
She was the best part of Die Another Day.
And of course, Gone Girl.
Yes, she's great. I like Rosamund Pike, and Richard E. Grant was in it, and he's funny as always.
From The Last Jedi.
Yes.
Or was it Rise of Skywalker he was in?
What was his?
He was in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember his character name. Oh, well. Then I saw The Bike Riders, which is this movie about the formation of the early motorcycle gangs in the Detroit area, starring a cast of great cinema and television dirtbags, including Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, Michael Shannon, Norman Reedus, and Boyd Holbrook.
Norman Reedus, what a shock. Playing a biker. I don't believe it.
But a good movie. It really talks about the schism between, as they put it in the movie, the beer drinkers and the weed smokers. As the years progress, the guys come home from Vietnam and they're the fucked up weed smokers, and they're much more violent and turn it into criminal organization.
By the way, I got to say that Norman Reedus, what a nice guy. Back in the day when I was doing Geek Magazine, we did a photo shoot, a cover shoot with him. I think it was for Walking Dead, probably. And it wasn't for his cooking show or his motorcycle riding show. And he just, what a lovely guy. Just so down to earth. Really cool guy.
That's great. So, and I also saw The Promised Land, which is a movie from Denmark starring Mads Mikkelsen. That feels like, I call it a cross between Kubrick and Leone. It's sort of this period Danish Western it's really good.
That sounds interesting.
Leone?
Yeah, Leone.
Kubrick meets Leone. Is that like basically extreme close-ups of people's eyes, but the shots last for 10 minutes? Is that how that works?
From now on, let's not say Mads Mikkelsen's in a movie. Let's just assume he's in it. And if he's not in it, we'll call it out. Mads Mikkelsen is not in this movie.
No Mads Mikkelsen.
Mads Mikkelsen movie. Say that 3 times fast.
Then I saw All of Us Strangers, which is this kind of meditative, self-reflective, almost supernatural drama about a gay screenwriter. It stars Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, who won the Oscar for a movie last year. Why am I blanking on it? It was really good.
He's the one that has the worm in the bottom of the bottle.
Exactly. Also, Claire Foy and Jamie Bell was in it. Then I saw El Conde, which actually is on Netflix now. It premiered on Netflix last Friday. It's this crazy vampire comedy that imagines Augusto Pinochet was actually a French vampire named Pinoche, who sort of came of age during the French Resistance. And to give you an idea of what kind of movie this is, one of the opening scenes is during the Revolution in France with Marie Antoinette's beheading, and that later that night he goes to the guillotine and licks her blood off the blade.
Nice.
But they said the revolution would not be televised, but clearly it is because it's on Netflix.
It was filmed.
But it was directed by Pablo Larraín, who did Jackie, Spencer, and Lisi's story. It has this gorgeous black and white cinematography by Edward Lachman, who did True Stories and the Limey, Aaron Brockovich, Virgin Suicides. So really interesting, weird, funny movie that you can watch on Netflix now. Another weird movie I saw was called Tuesday, about it's kind of a dark fairy tale about a terminally ill teenage girl whose mother, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, is in denial about her situation. I
thought it was about Michael Corleone's bride-to-be, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday. And want to know more about her.
It's the prequel to Wednesday.
Yeah, it's the Addams family's older
before she met,
sister.
Michael Corleone, her life in Corleone.
But then and then my least favorite was one called Janet Planet, which was written the filmmaking.
Wasn't that a Schoolhouse Rock?
Yeah, exactly. Interplanet Janet is the filmmaking debut of a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, Annie Baker, and I just really did not care for it at all. I think it's one of the weakest movies I've ever seen at a Telluride. Then and as usual, they had a great slate of documentaries. My two favorite documentaries were one called Beyond Utopia, which was about a South Korean pastor's efforts to smuggle people out of North Korea.
Ooh, that's cool.
They got cameras to the North Koreans to film their escape. And, if they were caught with this stuff, they would be killed or sent to concentration camps. Yeah, and it's really harrowing. But a really powerful documentary. And then another great one called The Mission, which was about that kid who made the news a few years ago, who was this missionary from the U.S. who went to the North Sentinel Islands in the Indian Ocean to bring the word of Jesus to an uncontacted, possibly cannibalistic tribe, and was killed by them. Yeah. But it was a great movie that was told from the perspective of they had his diary, which he had kept right up until he rowed ashore, and the diary got back to his parents. So they did dramatic, they read from the diary, but they also interviewed his friends and girlfriend and another missionary who went to the Amazonian jungle for 30 years. And at the end of it, decided that he was doing more harm than good and became an atheist. And
the last entry in the diary says, something smells good.
Oh my God.
Bacon.
Well, I was just thinking it would have been a much better final season than Lost. I would have liked to have seen that.
And then to wrap up, I saw Occupied City, which is the 4.5 hour long documentary by Steve McQueen, who did 12 Years a Slave.
I so want to see that.
And that is images of present day Amsterdam with historical accounts read in voiceover of all the sort of terrible and heroic acts that occurred in those locations during the Nazi occupation.
Yeah, that was our original idea for our documentary before we decided to make it about Star Trek locations. Originally, it was going to be about the Nazi atrocities, and we just realized that we wouldn't raise enough on Kickstarter, so we decided to go with Star Trek locations.
And nothing happened inside the zone, inside the 30 miles.
So Steve, it was good. But I did read people say, oh, it's too long, but I don't see how something like that can be too long.
I thought it was powerful. It's just and it's done in a very matter-of-fact way. It's just kind of in your face, and it's kind of an endurance test. I'd say probably at least a third of the audience left at the intermission.
That's what I read. Yeah.
But it has a quiet
They thought
power
it was the other
to it.
Steve McQueen.
Yeah. Where's the fast cars? What's going on? So that was good. I saw Thank You Very Much, which is a documentary about Andy Kaufman, made with with Bob Zamuda and Lynn Margulies and Lauren Michaels and Danny DeVito by the Safdie
Is
brothers.
Alan Spencer in it? He should be in it.
He is not, and I think that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
but I think Bob Zamuda and Lynn Margulies want to sort of control the narrative, I think, about Andy and want to be the keepers his memory to some extent. I don't think they want people.
Because Alan was so close with him and has such great stories.
Yeah. And then lastly, The Pigeon Tunnel, which is a new Errol Morris documentary about John le Carré.
Really?
Which is really interesting. It was a deep dive interview with le Carré filmed in the couple years before his death. And it's really, I thought it was really interesting.
Did he do a Q&A?
Not that I saw. He was there, and I believe he did one at a different screening. And then my favorite event at the whole festival was the silent film. And I know Mark and I have gone to the silence, where they will show a restored silent film with a live musical accompaniment. Mm-hmm. And this year it was a Soviet film from 1929 called My Grandmother. That was a bit kind of about the bureaucracy of the capitalist system, but it could very easily be applied to the communist system because it's all this ridiculous bureaucracy. But it's really funny, uses a lot of really great inventive film techniques that were being pioneered at the time.
Was the word babushka used at all?
Steve, it's funny. I was thinking when you said silent films, and I remember the first year you went, I said, the one thing you have to make sure is, go to the silent films. This is the secret weapon at Telluride. And, but I hadn't thought about it in a long time. But that year that Peter Bogdanovich was the festival director, and he showed The Crowd, The Last Command, and I forget what the third movie was, but it was just this unbelievable trilogy of silent films that was so remarkable. I've never seen a bad silent movie in Telluride.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to see these things in a sense, because they have this year the orchestra was called the Cleaning Women, which was this
Cleaning
Woman.
That was 82. Dead Men Don't.
This trio of Finnish men, but they created their instruments from like found objects and whatnot. So it had this really great acoustic electronica score that was really powerful and a lot of fun. And I still think probably my favorite silent film experience was when you and Kay and Aaron saw the Nosferatu at the late night movie, and literally on a dark and stormy night. It was so much fun.
Up in the mountains at the Chuck Jones.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that was when we came down on the gondola at 2 a.m. and it didn't stop.
It almost crashed
like in Moonraker. And we leaped from the car as it spiraled around and made its way back up the mountain. That was crazy. And it stopped a couple of times because it was a dark and windswept evening, and it stopped like at the top, like at the highest height on the mountain. And it was like, oh, this is not good.
The rain is battering against it, and it's kind of blowing around. There's lightning in the distance. You're like, oh, this isn't good.
Oh, I have so many fun memories to tell you. I can't wait to one day go back. Obviously, I met my wife there. I have so much to be grateful for. Many, many years that I went, and I'm so glad to see you carrying on the tradition, Steve. These sound like wonderful movies, and it was a wonderful time. Did you watch anything outside?
No. Oh gosh, what did they show? No, didn't watch anything outside this year.
Well, I'm glad you had a great time. And now, I think Darren was right. They're getting such a great show, but they're going to be disappointed because we're not going to be back next week. We're not going to be back till later this year when we return. This is like a special bonus episode. It's a bonus episode. It's not, not the season premiere.
Kind of the bonus situation.
The season premiere is coming later this year.
Hiatus interruptus.
I want to tell you, if you're a fan of the four of us, John, about movies and TV and stuff, you can now subscribe to the 430 movie. This gives you every free episode of 430 movie, but it also gets you our bonus show, Deck 78, where we deal with a lot of different cool movies and TV stuff. We have special guests, interviews. It's a delightful show. You can subscribe to Apple Podcasts. We encourage you to do so. It's only $4.99 a month. That money goes towards our sound mixing and our hosting and all that fun stuff that keeps us on the air. And also, we're hoping, if all goes well, to make video versions of these podcasts available with the new season. Not that anyone wants to look at us, but you might. I don't know.
Some of them they might have heard that I'm on the podcast.
That's right. They might have heard. His reputation precedes himself. And then, of course,
you can do that by going to Apple Podcasts and subscribing to 430 Movie. Also, we're going to be adding the Trexperts 430 Movie screening room, where occasionally, and again, this still needs to happen, we're hoping to set up a Discord channel whereby we can screen movies with you every once a month and have a chance to watch movies with us as we discuss them. So we're still working on that, but hopefully if we see enough interest among our listeners, that's something that we will try and expedite as well. So we hope you'll consider subscribing $4.99 a month to the 430 Movie. If you're already subscribed to Trexperts, Inglorious Trexperts, you don't need to subscribe to the 430 Movie unless you just rather hear it on Apple Podcasts rather than Spotify. And
they'll hand over the money without even thinking about it.
But you're getting the same great content. And Deck 78 is a really terrific show. We've been doing it now for a while. Steve recently joined us as the fourth light on that. On that, and we've had some great topics, and we continue to have some great topics as we continue. It's really a chance for us to do a deeper dive into a lot of the stuff that we love. So, okay, this week we're going back in time, the way back machine. We're going to 1983. Why? Because it's the 40th anniversary of the films of 1983. Nobody's making a documentary about it because it really wasn't that great a year. But we're going to talk about it. And one thing we're not going to talk about, because we already talked about it at length, is Octopussy versus Never Say Never Again, the Battle of the Bonds from 1983. If you're interested, it was a recent episode of Deck 78. You can check that out if you become a 430 Movie subscriber. It's a great episode. But I doubt that we'll touch much on the Octopussy versus Never Say Never Again when there's so many other wonderful films to talk about. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this podcast, the way it works is we curate a fantasy theme week of great movies, and sometimes not so great movies, thanks to Ashley. And we start on Monday with Steve Melching, who will get us started with his pick for Monday. And this is 1983 week. So, Steve, tell us about 1983.
Bake our way, toys. I was looking at the list of films that came out in 1983, and one thought immediately leapt to mind. This is Wednesday, the year. This is a year of Wednesday movies.
It's a year of Wednesdays.
It's a year of Ashley Miller's going to have
My favorite year.
So many great movies to choose from.
Remember the Glaive.
So my pick for Monday is one that it's never been picked on the show before, but I know we've discussed it at least once or twice. And that is a film that came out in February of that year, directed by Martin Scorsese. It's The King of Comedy.
And I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance. You know what I mean?
You don't just walk on to a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You've got to start at the bottom.
I know. That's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start.
So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest king of comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
His name is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Oh, Jerry, I love this guy. Always coming up with these great lines. I love him.
Nobody can remember his name.
Mr. Pupkin. Mr. Pupnik.
Mr. Puffer.
Rupert.
Pupkin, Pupkin.
But by 11:30 tonight, the whole world will know that Rupert Pupkin is the new king of comedy. Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, in a Martin Scorsese picture. The King of Comedy.
Bravo,
One of my
excellent choice.
One of my favorites of that year, written by Paul D. Zimmerman, who I did not know his background. He was actually a film critic for Newsweek, and he was a writer on Sesame Street, of all things, before he went on to write the King of Comedy as a spec script that De Niro bought for himself. He wanted to make it, and he originally took it to Martin Scorsese. Scorsese did not want to do it, so he had it set up with Michael Cimino to direct for a time until Cimino left to do Heaven's Gate. And then briefly, Bob Fosse apparently was interested in directing it, and Fosse wanted to cast as Rupert Pupkin, Andy Kaufman.
Oh my gosh!
And as Jerry Langford, Sammy Davis Jr.
Wow.
I'm wrapping your head,
baby.
That sounds wild, like Andy Kaufman and Sammy Davis Jr. Of course, if you haven't seen the film, it stars Robert De Niro as Rupert Pupkin and Jerry Lewis as Jerry Langford. They were also circling, initially, Scorsese wanted Johnny Carson to essentially play himself as the talk show host. Carson declined, saying he only does one take. And was not interested in doing a movie.
Plus, I don't want to give anyone any ideas.
Yeah, that too. I think he actually was nervous about that.
Of course he was.
Scorsese was also looking at Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Dick Cavett, and Joey Bishop to play that part before Jerry Lewis did it. It was edited by the great Thelma Schoonmaker, who edited so many of Scorsese's movies. The music soundtrack was produced by Robbie Robertson, who just passed away last month. And of course, he was a guitarist for Bob Dylan and was in the band and had a legendary career. And
also a great composer.
Yeah, it's just I just love this movie. It's such a. It also stars Sandra Bernhard as another obsessed fan, like the De Niro character, and Fred de Cordova, which I love the casting. Who Johnny Carson's producer plays Jerry Lewis's producer in the movie. It's a great black comedy. It's a really dark comedy about fandom and this not entirely untalented stand-up comedian who desperately thinks that he should be a star. And wants to be the king of comedy. Wants to go on and thinks that appearing on Jerry Lewis's talk show will propel him to superstardom. And I don't want to give away some of the great jokes if you haven't seen the film, but I can't recommend it highly enough. It's one of those movies that it had a fairly high budget for the time. It cost about $19 million to make, and it was just a bomb when it came out. It made only about $2.5 million. But it's one of those that has really, I think, stood the test of time. Because
you know who else loves this movie? Todd Phillips.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's been very influential, I think, over the years with filmmakers.
We should follow through on that thought. Of course, Todd Phillips directed Joker from a couple years ago with Joaquin Phoenix. And it's there are a lot of parallels and a lot of completely duplicated scenes.
I was going to say, it's a homage. It's an homage, and more.
But it's not an accident that De Niro was cast in that film. One of the reasons why I think that King of Comedy has stood the test of time is because it was prophetic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I agree that it's about being a fan. I don't think it's about that. I think it is about the person who sits in the audience and projects himself onto the screen and wants the fame. It is about the influencer culture. It's about, somebody who wants to be a TikTok star. It's about that, right? And that has become, because our ability to covet other people's lives and the things that other people do and the fame that they achieve for it has become so pronounced in our society. It's like, it's like what was that thing from Time After Time? Where David Warner's talking to Malcolm McDowell, and he's like, back in back home, I was a freak. Here, I'm an amateur. In 1983, De Niro is a freak. In 2023, he's an amateur.
That's such a great point. It's like if you ask people now, you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, when you grow up, an architect, a guy who installs toilets, cleans toilets in Japan, but the answer is more likely than not an influencer. People want to grow up to be an influencer. They think they should all be the star of their own movie, the star of their own life.
They want to be famous for being themselves to some extent, just giving their opinions, and much like we are right now.
That's right.
But that's different because we're bringing a level of expertise
I love the ending of this movie without giving it away. It's got a great blending of fantasy and reality at the end, where it's almost Gilliam-esque in the way that you could argue, you could interpret the ending in different ways. Is it fantasy? Is it really happening?
Is he dead?
Kind of like Taxi Driver. There's always that debate about the ending of Taxi Driver. Did what we see actually happen at the end, or was that his dying fantasy?
Yeah, that's a great pick. That's a really fantastic pick. And I got to tell you, it's interesting because on IMDb it says 1982, which is wrong. And people said, "Oh, why didn't you have it in 1982?" I said, "Because it came out in 1983." So anyway, great pick to start us off, which of course brings us to Tuesday and DAREN Dodgerman.
We do need another hero. We need a bunch of heroes. We need heroes like we had in the late 50s and early 60s. And among them are those men, in this case, who had what they call the right stuff.
On October 14th, 1947, Captain Charles Yeager shattered the sound barrier, propelled man into the future, and the search began for a new breed of men. Men who were fearless.
You've heard about our project.
Sounds dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Count me in.
I got a rocket in my pocket and a roll in my wall.
Ambitious.
Who's the best pilot you ever saw? You're looking at it, baby.
Patriotic beyond question.
I just thank God I live in a country where the best and the finest in a man can be brought out.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you
America's Mercury Astronaut!
7 men who would risk their lives in a hurtling piece of machinery to cross the threshold of space.
It takes a special kind of man to volunteer for a suicide mission, especially when it's on TV.
The government spends just all kinds of time and money teaching new pilots how to be fearless. They don't spend a damn penny teaching you how to be the fearless wife of a test pilot.
They were idolized by the public.
Hi, which one are you?
Shepard.
Oh, yeah?
Uh-huh.
Well, which one's Glenn? He's the one I want to meet.
Heralded by the media.
Gentlemen, can you tell us if any of you go to church regularly?
As far as church goes, I attend regularly.
But behind the image, they were human beings. Human beings with real fears.
Anybody goes up in the damn thing's gonna be spam in a can.
Frustrations.
What happened? He blew the hatch! I did not do anything wrong! The hatch just blew! It was a glitch! It was a technical malfunction!
Conflicts.
You're gonna think of the broader interests of this program. You are way out of line here! I'm out of line? Yes, sir! I'm running this show here! We'll see about that!
Disappointments.
Aren't we going to the White House, Gus?
Nah.
No ticker tape parade in New York? And no Jackie?
Pressures.
There's another hold from NASA, another delay. What can be going through a man's mind at this moment?
Gordo, I have to urinate.
No. Tell him he cannot.
Say, listen, old buddy. They promise we'll stop at the next gas station. They request that you remain in a holding pattern till then.
This is the story of the special few at the very top. The elite brotherhood whose achievements inspired a nation and captured the imagination of the world. These are the men who had the right stuff.
They all want to see Buck Rogers, and that's us.
Yes, we've mentioned this movie on the podcast before, but 1983 was a very specific year for bringing this stuff out because at that point, one of the men, John Glenn, was actually running for office again. And there was a big kerfuffle of whether he should be allowed to, because this film was such a soaring recommendation for him and his cohorts. But it is truly an amazing film that did not do very well when it came out. The wonderful Philip Kaufman, who directed it and co-written by him, and Tom Wolfe, who wrote the book. It's truly what's the word? It's a pantheon of heroes that are long gone and we will never see again. They're like. This is, of course, the astronauts who were selected for the Mercury program of the then freshly minted NASA. And they were the first free men to go into orbit and circle the Earth. It's truly an amazing story about these men who are absolutely just human beings. But it shows the process of making them into heroes and the actual things that they did, which make it reasonable that they should be. The great thing about it is one of the framing devices in the film is showing the contrast between the old guard, played by Sam Shepard as Chuck Yeager, the man who first broke the sound barrier in Glamorous Glennis, the X-1. And this new group of hotshot pilots that they mostly got out of the Air Force and some from the Navy. They had John Glenn, Gus Grissom, Alan Shepard, Gordon Cooper, Deke Slayton, Wally Schirra, and Scott Carpenter. And, of course, Mark's recent favorite Vice President, Lyndon B. Johnson, played by the great Donald Moffat fresh from Logan's Run TV series. It's such a grand scope of a tale of the creation of myths and the creation of our hold on the space race. And it's truly wonderful to show the very human people putting this together. And it's a wonderful story, and it makes you feel good that we once did this. And
not only that, it's funny.
It's absolutely funny. It's real life. They have these feet of clay people who are just borderline goofballs who are doing these amazing things because they don't really have any other choice of what they're going to do. I
don't forget the other hero of that movie.
There's nothing borderline about it. They just are goofballs.
Yeah.
The other hero of that movie is Bill Conti, the composer. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. And so great.
And Tchaikovsky and the other people that he grabbed from.
Whatever. Then you would say the same thing about James Horner.
Yeah, but Horner didn't do this one. I love the score. I listen to it often, and it really adds the flavor to this. And so does the amazing scene that is my favorite scene from this, when the fan dancer is dancing to Claire de Lune.
Oh, yes.
And
Bill Conti didn't write that either.
Didn't write that. Yeager is crashing in a big, expensive fighter jet that they could find, by the way. As opposed to today, who can't find a missing fighter. But it's the same sequence as we see at the end of Return of the King, where the hobbits are all sitting around the table at the is it the dragon?
Green Dragon.
Green Dragon, and everything is going
Mel
on.
Steiner.
And they are just quiet sitting there, and they give each other a little look because they know what they've gone through. But this scene with all the astronauts sort of hunching forward and looking at each other, and they know what they've been through, and it's a magical scene, and it brings a tear to my eye every time.
That beautifully, chrome silver aircraft flying up into the stratosphere, and then of course the great button. Is that a man?
Yeah.
Damn I saw this movie when I was in college. I saw it, the first time I saw it was on a television screen, VHS, pan and scan, 4:3. Thought it was fine. 10 years ago or so, I saw it in the Warner Brothers theater, in the screening room.
Nice.
And it was revelatory.
Yep.
It is so big. It has so much scope. It's so beautiful. The flying scenes are just amazing. Some of those, just being in orbit and the stars going by. It's beautiful. And I also have to say, Sam Shepard, what the hell? I mean, really say God doesn't give with both hands. No. God gave with both hands, and then he found some other hands. Then he thought, I need some more hands. And he just kept giving Sam Shepard stuff. It's he's this great looking guy, who's this great writer, who's this great actor, who is this deep thinker, who's very smart and urbane and what the hell?
He's married to Jessica Lange.
Right. What's that about?
No, the cast, the cast of this movie is impeccable. It's just a murderer's row of fantastic actors. Even in the little roles, they're no small parts. But, Jeff Goldblum is in this movie, and Harry Shearer as these sort of NASA functionaries. They're hilarious and great. I can't say enough good things about this movie. I love it.
I love this movie.
It had the right stuff. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And it was not a big success. It was another gamble from the Ladd Company that did. But, look at all the stuff that Alan Ladd gambled on that, stands the test of time, even though it may not have been successful at the time. Blade Runner, Star Wars, Blade Runner, The Right Stuff. So many movies that the Ladd Company made that didn't underperform, but that we now look back at and say, how brilliant they are.
And
Once Upon a Time in America.
Let's not forget that William Goldman took the first pass at adapting the book, and he worked on it for I think a couple of years before he met with Phil Kaufman, who had this idea of contrasting the old crew with the new crew, and Goldman didn't like that idea for some reason, so he stepped away.
Well, nobody knows anything, including Bill Goldman. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great pick for Tuesday, which of course brings us to Wednesday. And I have a thought about what Ash is going to pick. I'm writing it down here. I'm hoping it's not your 100 from the future, but you don't know. You don't know. It could be.
Could be mine.
There's so many things it could be, because Steve is so right. 1983 is what if the year was Wednesday?
I've locked in my guess as well.
Okay,
everybody's locked in their guesses.
Darren, are you going to lock in a guess?
I'm not going to guess.
You're not going to play our reindeer games?
Play this reindeer game of yours.
There are in my media room, there are 6 movie posters. Now, there's the ones I did.
No, there are
3
4.
of them.
There are 4 movie posters.
3 others that occupy my wall. 2 of them are Heavy Metal, Big Trouble in Little China, and the third is a film from 1983, also beautifully shot, also has an amazing score, also a slugger's row of incredible actors. Actors like Ian McKellen, Gabriel Byrne, Jürgen Prochnow, Scott Glenn, directed by Michael Mann with a score by Tangerine Dream. The Keep.
Event. The Keep, presented at selected theaters in 70mm and 6-track Dolby Stereo. The Keep brings together no less than 14 Academy Award nominees and winners for technical achievements and special effects. Michael Mann directs this startling vision of mankind's ultimate challenge, The Keep.
at this place?
No one knows for sure. You must not stay here.
Something has been released.
Did you find what you were looking for? Did you expect to find me?
What are you? Whatever kills us gets in anyway. Nothing we do, no security works.
What's happening to me?
The Keep. The Keep from Paramount Pictures.
That was not my guess.
That was not my guess. You know, can I tell you something, Ashley?
Yeah.
Oh, look, Steve said it was Get Crazy. My pick, I'm going to tell you, was Videodrome.
You know what? That's not a bad pick, by the way.
Well, you know what's funny, Ashley? I was going to pick The Keep.
Were you? Outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, that means you can pick Videodrome. But look, the road to The Keep is just a really interesting one, because Mann's first cut of this film reportedly came in at over 3 hours. Paramount flipped out. They made him cut it down to 2. And then they made him cut out a whole other half hour of the film, leaving it at 90 minutes, and just sort of this strange fever dream of a horror movie that still works. I think that, to me, the standouts in that movie are, Ian McKellen, who weirdly at the time looks exactly as old as he does now. It is like the strangest, most effective and realistic old age transformation in the history of film, because holy crap, do they nail it. Like, I thought Ian McKellen is 80 years old for the past 40 years. Jürgen Prochnow, always fantastic. And
Except in House of the Dead.
House of the Dead. Mark has feelings. And he's in kind of actually a role that he's sort of occupied before, but he's playing the good German. He's playing, the Wehrmacht soldier who is caught up in madness, and he is dealing with this SS a-hole played by the great Gabriel Byrne, who is not Kaiser Soze. It has this terrific setup where the Germans are occupying this village, probably like in the Carpathian Mountains, and they take up residence inside of a keep that they quickly realize has been built inside out. In other words, a keep that has been built to contain something rather than to keep out an enemy. And the interior walls are covered with these silver crosses, and the Nazis being the Nazis, well, they haven't ever seen like a bit of culture or art or silver belonging to another culture that they didn't want to take. And it turns out to be a massive, massive mistake as they unleash what is being kept inside of the titular structure. And what really becomes interesting about it is how that creature, it is used as a weapon of vengeance. And it's difficult to know at times, is the creature using Ian McKellen, or is it the other way around? Who's really in charge? Scott Glenn has this really gonzo crazy role as this hero, basically, who is called, who is summoned as soon as the creature appears to do battle with it and send it back. The Tangerine Dream score is amazing. I listen to that, on repeat all the time. It's some of my very favorite writing music. It looks beautiful. The cinematographer also shot Excalibur. It was Alex Thompson. Alex Thompson shot Excalibur. He shot Legend. He shot Alien 3, which is also a beautiful movie.
Which is also as messed up as this was by the studio.
Yeah, weirdly enough, it's like there's that little intersection there. I have been just sort of hoping against hope to someday, hear that they found all the footage that was cut, like sitting somewhere, in the Paramount archives that they're going to fix that film. I've wanted to go and dive in myself, like just looking for an excuse to do it. But it is such a joy. And it wasn't really available until about 3 years ago to see, like, other than on VHS, and I had the VHS. They released a DVD in 2020. I think you can see it now on Pluto TV. You might be able to rent it on Apple TV or through iTunes. Or
you can rent it. You just can't keep it.
Oh,
right. Oh God.
Oh.
I was able to find a Blu-ray of it in one of those outfits that does sort of less than above board things, but it looks great.
Yeah, it's funny, Ashley. The reason I say that I was going to pick it was I was always fascinated by this movie, and yet I never saw it till last year on the Criterion Channel.
Wow.
I'd always wanted to see it. I'd read about it. I was absolutely just, I knew the story about how, I was a huge Michael Mann fan and how this got taken away from him. And
Fan of Man.
Vision. I'm a fan of Man, exactly. And, because I love Crime Story and I love Miami Vice and I love Thief and I love, Manhunter particularly. So it was like, I was always fascinated by this, and I finally saw it, and it was, one of these great what ifs, because what's there is so bizarre and so fast. In a way, it's very representative of 1983, where 1983 kind of had all these aspirations, but execution wise, nothing really compares to the masterpieces of 82. It's like that, like I said, the hangover of it. And The Keep is just like, obviously it's not a great movie, but it might have been a great movie. We don't know. And it's so fascinating. It's a great what if. And there's so much of that in 83. Never Say Never Again is an example. A terrible movie, but so much of that got, messed up because of the budget, and they just had to finish it. And, scenes got, totally tossed. And I mean, it just, and there's just so many movies like this. Just bizarre movies. I mean, people forget it was the year of 3D. You had Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone. Awful. Jaws 3D. Awful. I mean, all these.
Don't forget Metal Storm, the destruction of Jared Sin.
I mean, they were really trying desperately to make 3D happen that year.
Amityville 3D, the man who wasn't there.
3D.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, just terrible. But the Keep is so interesting because it's the work of a true artist, and yet, and there's so much artistry in there, and yet it's so flawed.
Mm-hmm.
But even I remember at the time it had this mystique about it. And so I don't know. I was in high school and it had that kind of imposing key art with the logo key art, and it felt mysterious. And that creature was terrifying. It was a really effective creature design, and I remember seeing it on VHS back in the time, and it just kind of became this.
It was on
thing
HBO
of legend
too.
Yeah,
super creepy.
Yeah.
It's a creepy movie. It's a keepy movie. It's a keeper.
keeper.
But really, really interesting pick because, it's a film that a lot of people haven't seen, and it's really worth seeing. And at the end, you're like, what the hell was that? But in the best of all ways.
Yeah.
I think in some ways it was my first experience with cinema. And what I mean by that is
that explains a lot.
right? I mean, it's just a film that was just telling me the story through visuals and through sound and through the music. That it was probably the first movie that, and I was right at just the right age that it was something that I could process, but that I felt my way through as much as I thought my way through. It was kind of maybe my first visceral experience with a film.
You know, I agree with that because it has this incredible mood and tone about it, and this cinematic feel to it. And this is the same year that frickin' Return of the Jedi came out, which is kind of the opposite of that. And it really made you feel unnerved and unsettled, and it made things seem big and scary. I don't know.
It's so funny. It's a year where my memories of seeing these movies are more potent than the actual movies. So The Keep is interesting because it's a movie I didn't see back then. But, when I look at it, obviously, for what we know, I certainly remember seeing The Hunger in 1983 with my mother.
It was your mom week.
I remember seeing Scarface because, and I've told this story before, on a date, we couldn't get in to see Scarface, so we bought tickets for Yentl and then snuck into Scarface. So it's like my memories of 83 are so wrapped up in the experience of seeing these movies, because none of the movies really have that kind of resonance in the way the movies of 82 did as movies. These were more as experiences, like, even something like Psycho 2, which is not a terrible movie by any means, but it's insane to try and do a sequel to Psycho. The thing I remember is that one sheet that I had that in my room growing up. I love that one sheet of the Bates Motel and that fantastic logo that Darren used for one of our 430 movie alternate logos, which is just so great. The cracking, font of it being sliced through. And has that great Jerry Goldsmith score. It's like, how do you follow up Bernard Herrmann? Well, Jerry Goldsmith did a really respectable job. I mean, that's a magnificent score. But like everything that I look at, it's like, there are things about these movies I like. Ali Sheedy, I love in War Games, but it's like, so anyway, but so Thursday.
That's you.
Thursday. That's me.
That's
I
you.
know. I'm thinking, because I have to say, a lot of the movies in 83 that are any good, we've picked before. Like Risky Business, we've picked a couple of times now.
Absolutely.
We picked for Cruise Control. We picked for high school movies. I'm not going to go with Risky Business again because it's been on the big board a few times. Right.
This episode is not in a season, so we are under no such.
Yeah, I know, but it's the same thing with Zelig.
Go with your heart.
Didn't I pick Zelig once, Steve?
Yeah, on Mockumentaries Week.
I picked Zelig for Mockumentary Week. Zelig also is probably the best movie of the year, in my opinion, but I'm not going to pick it. I mean, I'll pick something really odd. I'm going to pick something really weird, which I think may surprise you, and you may say it's not eligible. Because again, Ashley picked the Keep, which was my pick. So I'm going to pick, and I'll let you guys determine if you'll allow it. Rear Window. And the reason I'm picking Rear Window is it's the first time I saw it. Why was that? Because there were 5 Hitchcock films that had been out of circulation for over 20 years. And this was the big re-release. Rear Window was the first one to be re-released, followed by Vertigo. And I think Rope was the third one. And I don't know if you guys remember, no, it was a huge deal.
Coming in.
No, so you're not going to allow Rear Window.
No, you can talk about it, but
it's a good try, but no.
Yeah. Okay.
The movies that came out.
We don't make the rules. Wait, we do make the rules.
Look, and I'm not going to go with something like Testament, which was just freaking depressing as hell. Really beautifully
Is that the one about the bear?
No, Testament's about the nuclear war. It's like in the
that's right. Prophecy is about the bear.
Yeah, prophecy.
Yeah. So, that's the thing. It's like I don't love this year. I'm so inclined to pick The Hunger, but again, I picked The Hunger before, and so I'm going to pick something that we haven't picked on this this show before. And I think it's a movie that doesn't get the love that it deserves. It's not a perfect movie by any means. It was the last movie directed by Bob Fosse, and I'm talking about the story of the late Dorothy Stratton, Star 80.
Yeah.
When the editor of Playboy told me I'd won Playmate of the Year, the first thing out of my mouth was, "Are you sure?"
I have this feeling about Dorothy. She's going to be a big star. Together, we could be somebody. People would treat us that special way, the way they treat stars.
36, 24, 36.
Dorothy is every man's fantasy.
Oh, Mr. Hefner, thank you.
Something else is going on here. I can feel it.
Yeah, if you really need me, just reach out and touch me. Come on and tell me so.
Playboy is a very special magazine, Dorothy.
They're gonna give me $10,000 for having my picture taken.
They're all nice to you. Everybody is wonderful. Mr. Hefner is wonderful.
And you think I'm sexy, come on, honey, tell me so.
Damn, I wish he wouldn't call me here.
Go out and get yourself a job, get something going, and try to make her proud of you.
If you really need me, just reach out and touch me. Come on, sugar, let me know.
You've grown. And he stayed the same. I think it's important that an actress and her director should have a good relationship, you know. This is a little rough. Are you sure you want to hear it?
We have some things we should talk about.
About a divorce, is that what you mean?
I want more freedom.
She's gonna come back, I know it.
He still had some crazy idea he could put it all back together again.
Please come back to me.
I want it to be over.
Sit down. Dorothy, you just can't let him do this to you. You can have her, but you're gonna have to pay. How do you load it?
You put it in the chamber,
She broke my heart.
and you cock it, and she's ready to go.
If you want my body and you think I'm sexy, come on, sugar, let me know.
With Mariel Hemingway as the late Dorothy Stratton, and a just tour de force performance by Eric Roberts as Paul Snyder. Yeah. And I remember Peter Bogdanovich was going to sue them, so they basically made the director a version that was nothing like Peter Bogdanovich, but at the same time was. Right. And of course, it may be the only movie to recreate a scene from Buck Rogers in the 25th century, so it gets extra points for that.
Wow, I've never seen this movie. They actually did that in Star 80? That's
it was
amazing.
a Buck Rogers-esque, because of course, you know, that was one of her few film roles. Yeah, besides Galaxina, was her appearance as the genetically perfect woman, Miss Cosmos, in I think it was in Vegas in space.
Or Cruise Ship to the Stars?
Cruise Ship to the Stars. Cruise Ship to the Stars, that's right.
Why do I know
Thank you,
that?
Steve.
That's a course.
Thank you. So my pick is going to be the not particularly well known, but I this is when I went to a date on where we actually did have no trouble getting in. So there are plenty of seats for us.
Who was it that played Dorothy Stratton?
It was
Mariel Hemingway? Yeah.
And the horrible thing about that is, and I remember this, she got implants for the role because, and you know, obviously years later that it was problematic and then she got rid of them. But it's like no actor should ever have to do that. It's one thing for Robert De Niro to put on 50 pounds, 60 pounds for Raging Bull, but you know, to get breast
surgery.
Yeah.
Nickel can do that for Hoffa. I don't mean his breasts. I mean like his face.
Yeah, he had
jowls. He got cheekbones.
Yeah.
But I've always loved Mariel Hemingway, not because of her role in Superman 4, but of course her brilliant role in Manhattan, 1979's classic Woody Allen movie. But yeah, it's interesting. 83. Just hearing everybody's picks. You know, there's still a lot of films we talk about. We'll talk about those in a second. But you know, I don't think if we went, you know, by the years, this is necessarily a year where we'd be like, oh my God, this is just, I mean, with the exception of maybe The Right Stuff, that these are just classic movies. You know, these are, you know, great. I mean, even Scarface, which I love, is certainly not my favorite De Palma movie, and it's certainly not a great movie. I love it, but it's not a great movie.
So let's talk about. There's a lot of sort of low key, interesting movies this year, but there's not a lot of particularly memorable movies.
And a lot of troubled movies. Darren, can you tell us about Doug Trumbull's Brainstorm?
Well, of course, Doug Trumbull, who had previously done Silent Running, and of course did a lot of visual effects work on 2001: A Space Odyssey, this was his second directing assignment, and it was a very troubled production. Not only because their lead actress died, Natalie Wood, right before they were done shooting. And the studio basically were going to shit can the whole thing and take the take the money. It was even when it didn't have these problems, it's an uneven movie. It is a story about the development and invention of a device that can transfer experiences. It can record them to multi-track magical glitter tape and play it back to a headpiece, and people can experience other people's sight, sound, memories. And it's really a great science fiction
premise.
Idea. And the thing is, Christopher Walken, who is the star, is so freaking weird in it.
How weird is he?
He's really distracting, if you ask me. Is the new headpiece ready yet? That's chocolate. I'm tasting chocolate. It's very odd.
I smell bread.
Yeah. I'm acting like a monkey. He is so strange, and you never once believed that he and Natalie Wood were an item ever.
Although they were in real life.
They were.
Well, that's debatable, whether or not they were an item, or whether or not other people were an item. Let's just say. I'm not going to go down that road, but look, it's a fascinating movie. The casting is a little uneven. The bad guy is very odd and not very memorable, except for his, blazing white hair. And the conclusion of the film had to be sort of cobbled together from scenes that were already shot, and it was a frustrating thing. But about a year after they finished shooting, the studio finally decided, okay, we're going to release it, and we'll just put it out there, and it bombed.
And was it the unique thing about it that those scenes in reality were like 1:85, and then when it went to Brainstorm?
Originally, the Brainstorm footage, the footage that you see of the playback of people's memories, was supposed to be in ShowScan, that Doug Trumbull developed. But of course, the same problem as usual. The theaters would not pay the money to install these ShowScan projectors. Right. So it couldn't be shown anywhere like that. And while it was a brilliant idea and would have been amazing to see this process, it just didn't hit. And
I always dug that movie, man. And I mean, obviously, it's got all kinds of problems.
There's certain scenes that are absolutely amazing and magical and emotional.
And it's hard to take your eyes off of Natalie Wood. Although I think that the basic idea, the person who really picked up that science fiction idea, ran with it, turned in a great movie that has just disappeared, is Catherine Bigelow making Strange Kids.
Yeah.
But no, I was always fascinated by that movie as a kid. Like, it was just one of those things where the trailer would come on TV, and I thought, wow, that looks really interesting to me. Like, the big idea of it, got to me, and I admire it.
Again, an amazing score by James Horner.
Yeah. I saw it at the Ziegfeld, which, I mean, if it didn't work there, it wasn't going to work anywhere. That was like the best theater in New York and in the country at the time. Steve, I got a question for you. If that Christopher Walken movie doesn't make our Friday count. Maybe it does. There is a movie I think that's a much more much stronger candidate for Friday, which is of course The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken. What do you think of what do you think of that as a candidate for Friday?
I think perhaps Mr. Miller is better equipped to talk about this movie because I've seen it. I'm not a particular fan of it, and I don't know if I've seen it more than once since then.
Forget I asked you. I'm going to race. I'm going to go back in time. Hey, Mr. Miller, a much better candidate for Friday that's also a Christopher Walken film is The Dead Zone. Can you speak to that for us?
It's not just also a Christopher Walken film. It's the second David Cronenberg film of that year. The other one being Videodrome that Mark thought I was going to pick, and I might have. If The Keep wasn't on the list. The Dead Zone is basically like the most screwed up episode of The West Wing you've ever seen. And, you know, it inspired, the book inspired a television show with the kid from 16 Candles. That was okay. But basically the premise is Christopher Walken plays a guy who, when he touches you, he can see the future. And he goes to a political rally with Martin Sheen, you know, who's running for president, and he shakes hands with him. When he shakes hands with him, he sees the future, and the future that he sees is a nuclear apocalypse. And he sets off to try to prevent this from happening. And it's a super interesting movie. It's a different sort of a David Cronenberg film. Every so often, Cronenberg will play around with, like, you know, doing a thriller as opposed to doing body horror. And look, there's definitely, you know, there are horror elements to this film, but not in the same way that there are horror elements to Videodrome. I would liken it most in his oeuvre to something like History of Violence or Eastern Promises, except a little more genre heavy, where he is basically telling a very straight ahead story. That in this case just happens to have this one supernatural element, but it's really well done. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Cronenberg, but it's really well done. It's incredibly well executed.
Is it your favorite Stephen King adaptation?
Wow, what is my favorite? Wow, Stephen King adaptations. What's my favorite? Maximum Overdrive. Kidding.
This machine called me an asshole.
Shawshank. You know, that inspired the Cars movies. Steve, I got to ask you, this is a really esoteric movie that I remember fondly from '83, but I don't think a lot of people saw. Michael Laughlin's Strange Invaders with Paul Le Mat.
Oh God, Strange Invaders. Yeah, I remember seeing this movie in the theater and quickly forgetting it. Honestly.
Alien, it's an homage to 50 sci-fi movies, but we talked about our 100 greatest sci-fi movies of all time on the Trek Spritz. So I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to give you another shot because I have a few movie. Of course, it's Bill Forsythe's Local Hero.
Local Hero. I've never seen Local Hero.
You've never seen? What a charming! No. That's such a Steve Melching kind of movie.
I'll add it to my list.
Charming. It takes place in Scotland. It's very sweet. And the little guy fighting the man. It's so Steve Melching. I'm surprised. You should check it out.
I will.
You'll check it out. So I'm going to ask Darren then, because you know, Steve apparently didn't see as many movies during 1983.
I got plenty of movies that I've seen. You just haven't. Well,
I gotta ask Darren first if he's driving down the holiday road.
I love National Lampoon's Vacation. Absolutely. Way better than Christmas Vacation. I don't care, all you fans of Christmas Vacation out there.
It's not even close.
Got to keep up for 5, maybe 6 miles.
Is the only good movie in the franchise.
But there is a whole cadre of people who absolutely love Christmas Vacation.
Well, they're wrong.
I'm just here to say that they're wrong. And look, it's based on the short story by our favorite teen director,
John Hughes.
John Hughes,
John Hughes.
John Hughes. who wrote the short story for the National Lampoon magazine. I think it was Vacation 53. Was that it? I think
something like that.
Oh, Vacation 55, because it had to do with Disneyland, and Disneyland opened in 55. Anyway, it's so funny. It is so weird. It is, it is funny despite of Chevy Chase. He is perfectly cast in this as a goof, and it's so there are bits of reality in it that are horrific, and it is so funny to have all these sort of strange and cartoony characters seem so very real in them. I think that's one of the strange, Harold Ramis directed this, and he had an ability to sort of make this hyper real situation. And just having the family go in the family truckster with the metallic P paint job. It's
Rusty, do not eat the family truckster.
It's so good. They're traveling from Chicago to ostensibly LA, and
Wally World.
Wally World. And there's so many surprises along the way. They visit the cousins, obviously the strange offshoot of the family who are nearly destitute and living their own lives that are kind of detestable. But it's
Randy Quaid, of course.
Randy Quaid, who is brilliant because he's not acting.
Yeah. He's just playing Randy Quaid.
It's and Miriam Flynn, who plays his wife, absolutely totally real portrayals. This is not comedy. This is reality. And of course, Dame Krakowski, who is the daughter, who apparently French kisses better than anybody, according to her dad. And they, the great Imogene Coca, who is Aunt Edna, who I'm not going to spoil things if you haven't seen it. She goes along a leg of the trip with them, and it doesn't end well. But it's so funny. Christy Brinkley is luminous, and it's such an unexpectedly funny movie.
Well, as was Beverly D'Angelo.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
She's luminous and unexpectedly funny.
Great. Yeah, she's great.
So Ashley, I got to ask you. In '82, Star Trek II was a great sequel, right? I joked earlier that your pick for Wednesday would be Superman 3. What was with these botched sequels? Superman 3, Jaws 3D, Psycho 2, Star 80. Oh, no, that wasn't a sequel.
The Star 79.
Amityville 3D. I mean, so many sequels, but none of them, really loom large in the annals of classic movies. What went wrong?
I mean, first of all, you're talking about a film world where sequels themselves were kind of a new thing. They weren't necessarily done all of the time. And the fact that, you had stuff like, the Planet of the Apes films, you had the Dirty Harry films. There were a couple of outliers, but it wasn't, a situation where literally every successful film kicked off a series of sequels. And what happened in the 70s was you had, so Jaws, Superman, frankly, even the Amityville Horror was a huge hit. And these movies, this idea of crafting a blockbuster franchise became the gleam in Hollywood's eye. But the problem was, I think, that some of these things did not want to sustain films that went beyond the boundaries of what had been originally created in the film franchise. And some of them, more or less successfully came up with sequels that worked. But for the most part, and it's funny because Superman 3 should have been one of those sequels that worked, right? Superman should be evergreen. It's, what's the villain? What's the problem? But I think that in the case of Superman 3, what really went wrong was Christopher Reeve. It was a really great example of what happens when you let actors have too much power. It wasn't a film. It was Christopher Reeve making a statement.
Superman 4.
Oh shit! Am I? Damn it! You're right. So forget everything. We're going to activate that time machine again. We're going to go back and we're going to pretend that I'm not talking about Superman 4, and instead we're going to talk about.
But I do think that he did have a lot. The whole idea that it would be a movie about Clark Kent and not about Superman, and that he would play both characters. He would play the evil Superman.
So
I do think part of
that is one of the best parts of the movie.
Yes.
When he's smoking and just kind of hanging out, and he's
flicking.
But it's not a film. It's a short film. It's a sketch.
It's an SNL sketch.
Yeah, exactly. And also they trusted what's his name. It wasn't Richard. Richard
Lester.
Richard Lester, as opposed to Richard Marquand, who directed the other terrible.
Well, let's ask. We're going to get to that. We're going to ask Steve about that. Does that film belong on Friday? Return of the Jedi, the third Star Wars sequel.
Well, it was by far, in a way, the biggest hit by almost an order of magnitude of that year. It made over $300 million, and the number 2 film, Terms of Endearment, was about a third of that. Hugely successful financially, creatively. I liked it at the time because I was 15 years old and I was a Star Wars fanatic and was desperate to see it. But it's not a film that for me has aged particularly well. There are things about it that I do like. But I'm not crazy about it. It feels like there are a lot of compromises made to make it. It feels like George Lucas at that point in his career was just kind of bored and tired and was just finishing the trilogy out of a sense of obligation. And I think the original storyline for that movie was supposed to be about Boba Fett and the rescue of Han Solo, and the whole thing with Darth Vader and the Emperor was going to be the basis for the next trilogy. But they ended up collapsing that storyline down into Return of the Jedi so that George could finish this trio of movies and move on. And budgetarily, it just looks cheap compared to, especially Empire Strikes Back. It feels derivative. Mark Hamill is game and does the best job I think he could, and Ian McDiarmid is great as the Emperor, but a lot of the other acting just feels kind of flat and perfunctory. Darren, it's fun. I enjoy watching it, but
could you tell Luke? Is that who you could tell?
Harrison Ford clearly didn't really want to be there.
Yeah, but apparently no one did. So look, I like it more than Steve does. I don't mind that it's a rehash because it's a well done rehash. And the Ewoks actually don't bother me because it's an interesting idea. But it's a little bit of a toy advertisement, unfortunately. And I think that's what Lucas really wanted out of it.
I like it a little less than Steve did. For the longest time, I would go around I'm talking about into the 90s, saying things like, I wonder when they're finally going to release a sequel to The Empire Strikes Back. That's how I felt about it. But look, since we are talking about when we normally talk about Fridays, we talk about what's the film that best encapsulates what 1983 is. And I've been thinking about this a lot, Mark. And what you said was 1983 was about, great ambition, not quite reaching the mark, no matter how talented the people are who are behind it. For my money, the movie that best expresses that idea is Twilight Zone.
I was just going to ask you about that. You beat me to it. That's so funny.
Yeah. Look, I actually really enjoy Twilight Zone, the movie. I think that there are things about it that are effective. Again, I first saw it when I was 12, 13 years old. But I think that it suffers from a lot of things. I think, number one, it suffers from directorial indulgence. Number two, I I don't know that what it says about the movie that my favorite part is just the wraparound with Dan Aykroyd. And hey, you want to see something really scary? Some of the stuff is good, but the episodes that get remade in the context of the film, I admire the ambition of what they were attempting with those stories. And I admire, I believe that the episode within the film, it was an anthology, that resulted in that terrible tragedy was an original, but I admired the fact that it actually was kind of a sequel to Animal House. That is the strangest damn thing.
Ashley, here's the thing. I mean, you talked about The Keep being, sort of a shadow of what, just taken apart by the studio. We talked about Brainstorm movie that suffered, obviously as a result of Natalie Wood dying and was piecemealed together. This is another example where if the tragedy of Vic Morrow and those two children's death in the John Landis segment, had to be piecemealed together after, they died tragically on the set. So it's another movie that we don't really will never really know what it would have been had those things not happened. And of course, like you said, that in a way was the most ambitious. The idea of a racist who finds himself in Nazi Germany as a Jew, right? If I recall correctly. But what you said, about the movie is, I love the wraparounds, which are fun with an uncredited Albert Brooks and Bill Murray, I think.
No, Dan Aykroyd.
Dan Aykroyd and Bill, Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks. But the problem is, It's a Good Life. The Spielberg sequence is not particularly good.
No,
kind of a bad life.
This is Kick the Can.
Kick the Can is not particularly good. Joe Dante's It's a Good Life is great, but so is the original episode. And as great as George Miller's Nightmare at 20,000 Feet is, it's not as good as the Shatner one. Yeah, because it's Shatner versus Lithgow.
That's the problem. At its best, it's mediocre.
Well said.
All of the sections, and I guarantee that had nothing gone wrong with Landis's section, that would have been mediocre too. That's just the sad part.
On paper, look at the talent that was behind that film. And the thing that they were trying to accomplish. Believe me, I'm not arguing that it's the best movie of 1983 or even my favorite movie of 1983. But to me, it is the most 1983 of the movies that were released in 1983.
Well, I can do a quick lightning round and just throw out some titles.
Go ahead. Hit us up. Here's with your best shot.
Some of the other top grossing movies that year were Flashdance, Trading Places, War Games, Sudden Impact, another sequel, the Dirty Harry film, and Mr. Mom. We also had movies like Blue Thunder.
What brings you to air support?
Kind of like the idea of it. No guns, no kicking in doors, just quiet.
Oh, yeah.
For Frank Murphy, policing the air has its ups.
Welcome to air support.
And downs.
You got a runaway.
Well, I just wanted to say, sir, that was my fault. I talked Murphy into taking us there.
You're supposed to be stupid, son. Don't abuse the privilege.
Roy Scheider is Frank Murphy, a lone wolf.
Freeze! Bozo, how many burglars come in the front door with a key?
Who's about to become a guinea pig.
I thought it was illegal to arm police helicopters. Well, that would depend on the circumstances, wouldn't it?
Columbia Pictures presents Blue Thunder, a flying arsenal that hears through walls, sees in the dark, and thinks your thoughts.
Wherever you look, the guns follow.
It was designed for war-torn countries.
One civilian dead for every 10 terrorists. That's an acceptable ratio, unless you're one of the civilians.
It was assigned to American cities.
You're talking about crowd control from the air?
That's what this special detail is all about.
They told Murphy to test it. They didn't tell him what it was for.
Dozen of these coppers and you could run the whole damn country.
Who was behind it?
Where are we?
Federal building.
Really? Hey, you want to find out what's going on in there?
Certainly do.
Hey, you gotta do me a favor. I want you to pick up a
package for me.
Why they chose him.
He's totally unsuitable for our purpose. Don't stop for anything or anybody.
Or why they changed their minds.
Turn the face of a good old spot.
I never saw this guy before in my life. Come on, let's go.
Well, not so fast. That's government property. Give me that.
But when Murphy went looking for answers,
Got all this on tape? I got every word of it. Gets back to me, I'll deny it.
the answer came looking for him. They had the ultimate weapon and the perfect plan, but Murphy stole their thunder.
We had two other Stephen King adaptations in Christine and Cujo. We had A Christmas Story.
Steve? Which was worse? Christine or Cujo?
I kind of like Christine. We have A Christmas Story, a modern classic. We had Educating Rita with Michael Caine. We had Krull, which we mentioned earlier. The Man with Two Brains, the Steve Martin. We had David Bowie and Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. It's an interesting movie. We had a Monty Python film, The Meaning of Life. We had Never Cry Wolf, which I quite like. We had the S.E. Hinton 1-2 punch of The Outsiders and Rumblefish.
Yeah.
We had an interesting animated movie that I was always fond of called Rock and Rule by Nelvana, which is a weird fantasy animated movie. We had Something
Is Boba
Wicked.
Fett in that too?
No. Same studio. We had Something Wicked This Way Comes. Oh, we had Bob and Doug McKenzie in Strange Brew. We had Valley Girl, and we had Silkwood, and we had, of course, The Big Chill, Tender Mercies.
Oh, shoot! That's my pick. I take it back. How did I not pick The Big Chill? I totally forgot about The Big Chill. Is it too late to substitute?
Because it's totally forgettable.
No, I love The Big Chill.
Totally
The Big Chill is one of my favorite movies of all time. No, absolutely not forgettable.
Or can that be Friday?
Are you going to activate the Omega 13?
I mean, look, I love Star 80, but I mean, The Big Chill is I love it. But Lawrence Kasdan, it's one of my favorite movies of his, and it's so powerful, and it's just what a great cast and wildly entertaining and such amazing music. All the Motown music.
I love watching whiny yuppies. I really
you know what? Because you're just a bitter old guy.
Yeah, that's right. And I was back then too.
You haven't changed a bit. You're just as warm and sociable as ever.
Twice we've skipped over War Games, which I think is the most 1983 of all the movies.
Yes, I would agree with that.
America's front line of defense is this computer. It is totally secure. Or is it?
You're really into computers, huh?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Dialing into the school's computer.
Are those your grades?
Yep. I don't think that I deserved it. Do you?
You can't do that.
Already done.
You can go to jail for that.
Only if you're over 18. This computer company is coming out with these amazing new games in a couple of months. You might want to play those games. Wow.
What?
We got something.
Games refers to models, simulations, and games that have tactical and strategic application.
Greetings. Game time is near. Shall we play a game?
Love to. Let's play. Global thermonuclear war.
Fine.
All right.
We have a launch detection. We have a Soviet launch. What the hell?
Missile warning, no malfunction.
Oh my God.
I repeat, confidence is high.
Mr. President, this is Barry Norman.
Is this a game or is it real?
What's the difference?
War Games. Begin playing June 3rd at a theater near you.
I don't love it, but it's the most 1983. It's John Badham. It's sort of a mediocre director who was making everything back then, and they were all hits.
So I actually have a War Games story.
Yes.
So God help me, I spent solidly 3 years of my career working with Walter Parks and Laurie McDonald.
Yeah.
And by the way, they were always very kind to me, and it was you don't stick around hanging out with people for 3 years because they're anything but that, unless you're a total masochist. But the running joke with Walter was always like, and did you know that I wrote War Games? It's and look, that wasn't like the movie that we always talked about with him, but the interesting thing about War Games was this. So I went in to MGM and I was getting ready for a pitch, and we were hanging out with the executive because we were waiting on people to arrive, and so we started talking about our experience with Walter, and the executive asked what the experience was like. And started talking about War Games, and like, has he talked about War Games? Yeah. He says, well, the original concept for War Games wasn't what War Games turned out to be. The original concept for War Games was basically Real Genius, but Walter ran off and disappeared. He had a writing partner at the time,
he didn't write it with Laurie.
No. Laurie was just his producing partner. She wasn't a writer, and he ran off. They wrote, they worked, they kept calling and saying, oh, it's almost done. It's almost done. Right. There's some changes. It's almost done. They turn in this script that bore no resemblance whatsoever.
It's completely different than what they pitched.
Exactly. And luckily for them, everybody loved that script.
Yeah.
But it could have ended his career before it began. But yeah, I mean, all credit to Walter. I think that's actually a terrific script.
I got an idea.
Yeah.
Friday should be a John Badham double feature. War Games at Blue Thunder. That captures 1983 better than any. John Badham was like the hot director for some unknown reason, because he was like a TV director. His movies looked like TV, and yet everything he did was like these huge hits. And War Game was so in the zeitgeist that year. It didn't even know how in the zeitgeist it was. I mean, because it was like a John Hughes movie meets Stranger Things before either of these things were really a thing. And then Blue Thunder is just this ridiculous movie that also with Roy Scheider and Malcolm McDowell about, the super high tech helicopter. The year after Firefox, you had Blue Thunder.
And it birthed the TV show.
Yeah, well, and it birthed 2 TV shows, Blue Thunder and Airwolf.
That's true.
The 80s. The 80s was a decade of excess, so maybe a double feature is appropriate.
Well, especially that year, and it's just
a decade of excess and Dabney Coleman.
And
you could also argue that Sudden Impact kind of encapsulated the 80s, because Ronald Reagan was quoting from that movie all the time. Make my day.
Yeah. It's funny because that movie's pretty good.
Christmas Story.
Like for the beginning, and then it's just not.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because he cast Sandra Locke, his girlfriend, in it, and she's not great. And but yeah, that movie is
crazy
so
but it's always the same crazy.
It's so zeitgeisty though. Sudden Impact.
Yeah.
Sudden Impact. This is the year Reagan invaded Grenada. Make My Day was like, he adopted.
I was there when the shit hit the fan in Grenada.
And it was so his movie. Yeah, because he used that Make My Day, and it's like people went crazy. I mean, and that was, everyone was quoting that. That was a huge, even so more than Do You Feel Lucky Punk in the 70s, Make My Day was like this.
I think that's the signature quote for Dirty Harry that most people remember. Make My Day.
Make My Day. Yep, yeah. It is.
Yeah, because the whole thing.
Even though my favorite is like when he opens up the fortune cookie and he's like, it says you're shit out of luck. I love that. I
don't know. Yeah. Well, so do we have a week?
What do you think, Darren? What's your pick here?
I want to go with War Games, but I'm fine with the double feature too.
Okay, what about you, Ashley? What do you think? Sun Impact or War Games Blue Thunder double feature?
Good God. I'm going to go with the double feature.
Steve?
Yeah, I can go with double feature.
Okay, I can go with double feature too.
So let it be written. So let it be done.
The John Badham double feature.
Yeah. John, not Badham.
But they both have mediocre scores by Arthur Rubinstein. those 80s electronica synth scores that are so dated.
I like War Games.
The great ones are great.
Yeah,
like
except
anything
for
else.
I like War Games too.
Yeah,
After
it's like,
Peter
but you know what the
Coyote
thing is?
saved E.T., he saved us as Professor Falcon.
Yeah,
wasn't that Peter Coyote?
No.
Yes,
it wasn't.
The actor that played Professor Falcon was not Peter Coyote.
No, it was David. No, it wasn't David Strahan.
No,
it was
John Wood.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
John Burke. So was Peter Coyote even in War Games?
No.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
That's the Mandela effect.
It was Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, though. They were in it.
Yes.
Yes.
You're thinking James Tolkien, who played principal in Back to the Future.
Yeah, and also was the commander in Top Gun.
That's correct.
The battleship.
Yes.
Yeah. He was in a lot of things back then. We should do a week of actors who were in a lot of things back then. These character actors who were like in every movie. You know who was in every movie? Tracy Walter. Remember Tracy Walter?
Yeah. Yep.
Repo Man and Conan the Destroyer. He was like in every
my name
movie.
is Larry. This my other brother Larry. Wait.
It's hey, that's what's their name week.
Yeah.
That's
that guy in that movie.
It's that guy week.
Yeah,
that guy week.
I like that. That's funny. But it could be a that gal too.
That's correct.
So.
Anyway, we got a week.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, but we didn't even talk about Staying Alive.
We shouldn't.
Staying Alive, was that a sequel? That wasn't a sequel.
Yeah, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever.
It was the sequel to Saturday Night Fever. Yeah,
I missed that when I did my wrap up of sequels. I forgot to mention Staying Alive.
And you can tell by the way I use my watch.
Okay, how many of you can sing the Your theme to sing us out of here? You got to
recap
from the future. Yours world, I know, but yours world is your. No, you don't know it.
No.
Anyway, what a great week. How great to be back on the 430 movie, albeit only for this 1 week.
Well, that's how it goes.
We'll be back for more weeks.
Well, let's recap our picks for this week. On Monday, Steve, what are we watching?
Monday, it's Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis in Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy.
Tuesday, Darren Dochterman.
The right stuff. They all had the right stuff. These guys had the right stuff. Their stuff is so right.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday night, they will all face the evil in Michael Mann's The Keep.
On Thursday, they all wanted to be a star, but it just turned out they had to chill out. My pick, replacing Star 80, The Big Chill.
Nice.
I can't believe I not even close. Love The Big Chill. And a great Criterion Blu-ray as well. And it's on 4K on Apple TV for those who are interested in watching it. And we didn't even talk about Lone Wolf McQuade.
And Dennis Quaid in perhaps his best role.
What is our pick for Friday?
Yeah. Dennis Quaid plays the dead guy in The Big.
No, that's Kevin Costner.
Yep.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Same thing. How is it the same thing? Anyway, we are so glad to be back with you. We're going to be back later this year with an all-new season on the 430 movie. So follow us on social to find out when we'll be back, or you can just subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and you can subscribe to the 430 movie and get bonus episodes of Deck 78 while you're waiting for the 430 movie to come back by subscribing at Apple Podcasts. But until then, on behalf of Stephen Melching, Darren Dochterman, Ashley Miller, myself, Mark A. Altman. It's been so long, I don't know what we say.
Eyewitness News.
Oh, yes, that's right. Save us the aisle seat. And until then, Eyewitness News starts now. We'll see you later this year on the 430 movie.